Hi, and welcome back to Season 2, Episode 11 of the Leading Adam podcast. Today, Adam and I sit down with Dr. Jillian Gilbert to talk about generational differences and taking multi-generations in a classroom and applying that to the workspace. We're super excited to have you with us today. Stay tuned.
The Leading Adam podcast is hosted by me, Adam Binkard. I've spent the last 10 years researching how a healthy human experience is the key to innovation and student retention and education. And now I'm taking to the mic to share what I've learned. Hear how I've defied the odds and transformed from a landscaper to a national expert in student success in less than 10 years. Not an educator? That's okay. Stay tuned for entertaining stories and practical takeaways about leading self, leading leaders, and leading culture. The Leading Adam podcast is co-hosted by Erica Crabtree, produced by Chris Spangle, and sponsored by 240 Solutions. Connect with us at 240solutions.com. And I hope you'll stay tuned because together we can change the world.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
Season 2, Episode 11. This took some thought this morning. We had to remember where we are. That's what happens when you're seasoned pros.
Well, it doesn't help. I have a podcast with my daughter, so that's not helping at all because I'm trying to keep track of that. We're also in Season 2. So
you're going to start talking about rom-coms in the middle of this?
You never know what's going to happen. But this morning, we've got Dr. Jillian Gilbert with us.
Hey, good morning.
Hello.
And we are excited to have you on to talk about generations and how that influences organizational leadership and all kinds of things. Who knows what we're going to talk about?
Let's see where the path takes us.
That's right.
I'm telling you.
Excited to hear about the Lego thing, too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. That's going to be fun to hear about for our guests. But we want to set a base and get them to understand who you are. We're learning a little bit. We've only known each other now for about 15 minutes.
I feel like we're old friends already.
I know. It just feels so comfortable.
But hey, anything can happen when you got coffee in your hands.
That's true.
That's right.
So yeah, let's start there.
Sure.
Let's tell us a little bit about Jillian and your background and how you ended up where you're at.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, my life story. No. So I am new to Indianapolis. Just moved here in July.
Oh.
I had been in New York prior to this. For a couple years. And then before that, I'm a homegrown California girl in the heart and spirit.
Okay.
So it's been really fun to transition here, just to put that as a point. I actually really love Indianapolis. And I think people don't understand how cool it is and how cool Indiana is in its spirit and core. So it's been fun. But yeah, so I have an interesting past. I've been in higher education for 25 years.
Okay.
But not all in one spot. So I started as a student in doing work with outreach through my university in California. And then when I graduated, they offered me a job. And they're like, we want you. So then I ended up working in the student development side for about 10 years. I think total almost 10 years of that 25 was in student development, working with outreach, mission work, anything related to student development, leadership development within those domains. And so student development and student affairs is like a whole nother aspect of the university that sometimes I think we don't fully understand. So I'm really thankful for that.
Yeah.
Then I transitioned over into higher education side of the academic piece, right? So the academic piece of all that. And I received my doctorate, not even knowing what I wanted to do with it, truthfully. My doctorate was a personal thing for me. It was something that was important because of the subject matter.
Okay.
So I got a degree in strategic leadership. And it was something I cared about. But through the course of that, I realized no, I think I really do want to make an impact in the classroom. And I think I may have something to offer.
Yeah.
And so I ended up in the academic side as a faculty member in our School of Business. Then I moved over to behavioral science space and leadership studies, which was interesting because it wasn't in our business. And then eventually moved back to the School of Business and ended up being the chair of our department. And then ended up moving on from that university. Through the course of that time, I also started my consulting practice, corporate training, because I really believe you can't really teach in the classroom if you really don't know what's happening out there in industry.
So true.
Yeah. So I built that muscle and realized I really love this muscle too. And so ended up doing consulting, higher ed, left my university, and then ended up doing that for a while, and got connected with Indiana Wesleyan through the Chancellor Eileen who I had known at my university in California.
Gotcha.
Oh, okay.
And her and I had resonated with the ideas of innovation and creativity and how higher ed can look different, how teaching and learning can look different, because we're talking about fundamentally how are we building a student to be their best selves in their life.
Yeah.
Right.
Not just as a student, but outside of the classroom.
Completely. It's a development opportunity. It's not just we're going to, teach rotely. So she's like, hey, you wanna come and help us work on some things. So I started as a consultant doing actually developing their Leadership by Design Center,
Awesome.
Building leadership development, non-academic, just for industry as a service. And then I was like doing that. And then I was like, I think I can offer more. I think I could contribute in a new way. And so then she's like, I think you're right. Yes. And I like a challenge, and I really want to see the best of theory meet the best of practice to really meet the needs of people in the space they're working in.
Yeah.
And so she's like, I think you're right. And the dean of the School of Business was like, I think you're right. And so then I transitioned over back into the academic space.
Okay.
So now I'm assistant dean there. So my journey, I would say, is never been like I've had goals, but it's never been about the money. And it hasn't really been about those bigger like roles as much as like I think I have gifts and talents. I see people in a unique way, and I want to give my talents to help them build their talents so they can be their best.
That's awesome. So our listeners are by and large educators or working in education in some level. And so they understand no one gets into education for the money.
No,
it's not. That's not
try,
the game
but
we get into play. But I like what you said. You really believe that the best of theory can meet the best of practice, and that's why I think your insight's going to be so important here, because the only way to do that is to understand human behavior and the way we learn and the way we interact. And I think that's an interesting part of this, which we're going to get to. Regarding generations and generational leadership. But that's quite a journey.
Yeah. And love so many different perspectives that you've picked up along the way. I mean, living East Coast, West Coast, now in the Midwest.
Oh my gosh. And they are different. And they are very different.
Very different.
And you didn't even talk about before that, as a child, you grew up not even in the United States. Can you talk a little bit about how has that influenced your leadership and what you do? And
so I did grow up out of the United States. My parents were with a mission organization, and I grew up in Quito, Ecuador, and it is kind of near the top of the side part of South America, and it's connected. People know the Galapagos Islands. It's part of that country. Anyway, so I went to an international school. So there were every single country, you could name, I think over 25 to 30 countries represented. All of these kids were all at the school. And then we're in a country that's not our own. So you would have people from Asia and Ecuador. So it's like double time in a U.S. school, so like the cultural dynamics, they learn Spanish before they learn English. And we're learning Spanish, and it's just a really interesting dynamic. So I think I learned to navigate the realities of the world differently. We were the minority in the country. That's interesting.
Sure.
I experienced what it was like to be made fun of differently. And then on top of that, you're actually affluent still in this third world country because you're from the United States.
Right.
So you're looked at as a source of job, like offer jobs, you're supposed to provide jobs for local people. So like all of those layers. And then you walk around and you see immense poverty, immense need, and but you're living in it and you're a teenager.
Oh,
so
gosh.
you're like, this isn't my home country, but I feel at home here. But my identity, so even just like the identity discussion that people experience, I think that's what I really walked away with was it doesn't matter where you are always struggling with who I am in that space.
Mm-hmm.
And that has carried with me, that identity piece, because you have to find some sort of resolve deep down inside of yourself so that you're not just getting whiplash.
Like where you belong in that space and how you belong, but also that sense of individual self, like who am I?
Completely.
What are my gifts and talents? What do I have to give this world or the community?
Well, what you described too, in episode 6, we had Mario Rango on, who's with Indiana Wesleyan University.
Okay.
And he talked about that kind of identity piece too. I don't fit here. I don't fit there. Like, who am I? What am I doing?
That's right.
Yeah, really challenging part.
So hard.
Of that. I think what's so cool about your experience, you're aiming to see something better for education, right? Mm-hmm. Some are aiming to tear it down, like just wreck the whole thing.
Right.
Some are aiming to really see it reach what it can reach. And I think no matter which path you are on, both are noble, both are challenging. Mm-hmm. But what you bring in by joining in and trying to bring change and move education to where it can be is something really unique, because your experience with education is kind of outside of the traditional system.
Very much so.
And I think if there's anything true about whichever path you're going to choose, it's the real change is going to come from those who haven't been just completely brought up in that system, because it's too many assumptions.
Oh, yeah.
And we had Dr. Wachtel on, who I know you work closely with. He was a breath of fresh air when he came, because he came from outside of higher education with business background. So, yeah, you've got a lot of interesting facets, right?
Yeah.
You kind of look through this, and we've learned
true.
that so many layers to your perspective.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I don't always think that way, though, because like when you're living in it, you don't realize it until you start to share your story again. And I think that's the important part of sharing story, right? Is that you start to realize, oh, yeah, like I did have these experiences that make me uniquely able to contribute, and everybody does.
Yeah, and you think about all those different experiences that you have. You mentioned earlier, bringing creativity and innovation, and what better foundation of that than having all these different experiences where different perspectives that you have combine and form new ideas and things like that. And so, yes, I'm curious, what is your role now? What is that?
So I am the assistant dean in the DeVoe School of Business, Leadership and Technology. I'm probably saying that reverse, is business, technology, leadership.
Someone
in there. Someone will. And sorry, Andy Hughes, my dean, if you hear this. But no, in the DeVoe School and national and global part of Indiana Wesleyan University. And my role is really to help think through some of these applied creative ways that we can reinvent learning. And really, we believe that we want to be a friend to the learner for their entire life, not just for a particular degree. And so really thinking through what that looks like to be a friend of the learner, and to really say, we're not just here for one aspect of your career, we want to be here for your entirety of your career. So I'm helping with those kinds of pieces, some, leadership in that space. And then I'm also the director of the Leadership by Design Center, which is an enterprise of the university that is a non-academic entity that provides consulting, training, and leadership development to any business that would like it and needs some help in those areas.
Yeah.
So is that a part, like, how do you be a friend to the learner for their entire career? Like, unpack that a little bit. What is that starting to look like?
Well, I think we have to stop thinking of people as degrees and think about what it is that they want to learn and need to learn to be their best in any career they have. And so a lot of people do end up by default sometimes in a career trajectory, but we want to start with, well, who do you want to be? What are you thinking about? Okay, well, why don't we offer some learning here? And maybe it's not an academic degree. Maybe it's more of a certificate.
Right.
Okay, well, you want to get a degree? Well, you know what? Why don't you take it for credit and we'll count it towards your degree? Or you know what? Maybe you're done with your degree, but how can we help you upskill? How can we help you reskill? And then there's this whole group of people who want to rethink their entire future career.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Well, how can we help them think through that and
Mm.
come back and learn more
Mm-hmm.
and figure that trajectory out? So I think it has to do with creating those inroads of learning that are not just tied to what we have traditionally called degrees.
Yeah.
Right. Which is something that you could earn in your early 20s. And one thing that has been so eye-opening working on the admissions side is getting to talk with all of these adult learners who are in midlife, maybe, or even older, who are like, I think I want to go a whole different direction.
Yes.
Or I think I've been doing this career for 20, 30 years. I want to have this post-retirement career that really aligns with something totally different.
That's right.
And it's just so interesting that learning never stops, and that bachelor's degree that was earned, however many years ago.
Well, and saying
It's just a
too
stepping
that
stone.
we have to view them as more than degrees.
Yeah.
I mean, that right there is a paradigm shift
Mhm.
in looking, and I think it changes. Erica's most of your experience, education is at the front end of the life cycle, and I think that's been a miss so much is we don't hear the student. I'm going to speak for admissions. All the
Wait a
admissions
second.
folks are like, "Shut up, Adam, you never did it." But I think so many times we're not hearing what they're saying.
Right.
We're listening for, oh, that's this degree or that's this thing.
That's true.
And what you're describing is, okay, how do we hear them and plug them in? Now, still, you need to think of the university services.
right.
But I think the highest pinnacle we could get to for post-secondary education is to be listening and say, you know what? This is what I hear you saying, and I'd encourage you to check out this school.
Yeah.
I know that sounds wrong, but if it's really about the learner and you hear that they want to do this, and that's not really something you offer as an institution in a direct way,
Right.
the kindest thing you could do for the learner is to suggest, have you explored this program somewhere else? And I don't know if it'll ever get there, but wouldn't that be incredible?
I've done that through the course of my career, especially when I was over a particular program. I had that conversation a lot. And I think there is, for me, it's an act of service to be honest about what it can and can't provide.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it also provides an opportunity to say, we don't have this. Well, let's create it then.
Sure.
And it's kind of like we do have to change our mindset about it being only about this way and only looking for those cues, because most people, especially adult learners, they're coming back. Like I imagine, like I've had so many women who have been home with their children and they want to come back. They are terrified. They have so much skill and capability just in who they are as people, and they don't know where to start. And they're looking at a degree, but they may not know that may not be the degree. It's just they need to process it.
Right.
And so helping them process. And I've worked with students in their first couple classes before, and I'm like, you know what I think? I think you finish this and then you need to go do this. Or, you know what?
Sure.
This does not seem to be matching.
Right.
And we can't make an institution be something that we're not.
Right.
But we also can be holistic in that reality,
so
right?
you're with Indiana Wesleyan National Global, which we know is adult online education. And you're talking about this idea of this kind of ideal state for learning. Like, how do we create dynamic ways for people to learn? But even in the demographic that Indiana Wesleyan is serving through National and Global, you have a myriad of age ranges. Because they're an adult, which, they're enrolling at 18, 19 on the adult side programs now. And then you have, of course, the anomalies who are 65 years old and want to finish a degree. So how do you, with your background and studying generational influence, let's talk about that a little bit and how it plays into learning. I think it has such a fascinating impact. So set us up, because I don't even know what to ask. I love this conversation.
Yeah.
How do you even process that?
Well, that's a really good point. I think where I started, so let me tell you how I started getting into the generational discussion, and then where I'm kind of landing it in my mind, at least for now. So I was teaching undergrad for a long time. I think first mistake we make is we pigeonhole the age demographic and we teach the degree assuming that age never changes. So a bachelor's degree, we don't know how to always translate that into the adult learning space, right? Because we assume they're the 18 to
Good point.
21-year-olds, but really now bachelor's degree could be
They know a thing
40.
or two.
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, I was in the traditional space. And then I ended up working in the graduate space, the adult learning space. And what I started to notice was the way the boomer and traditionalist generations had built institutional higher ed was very much the way they had learned, which was there's a hierarchy, teacher to student. We tell you what you need to know. And then we take a test to challenge that you actually know it. And so we built kind of the systems around that. And so when I started teaching at the graduate level, I started to notice a shift in the way students were responding to that. And maybe it's because my generation too, because I'm a little bit younger as well. And I was younger starting teaching in grad. I was in my 30s.
Okay.
And so that might have been it too. I was closer to the undergrad age kind of at that point. But I started noticing like they're not responding well. They're not doing the work. They have a little bit of animosity to being in class.
Yeah.
You know, and there's just like low level, like something's going on. And then even it doesn't matter what modality,
right?
You know, because we built the online space to be the same. It's just in electronic form.
Right.
Right. So I'm like, you know, there's got to be more to this. So then I started researching generations and specifically related to learning. And that's when I realized that even 10 years ago, Gen Z was just popping into the college market.
Right.
And I was like, oh, we're seeing earmarks of a dramatic shift in the student population that is affecting how the learning experience. And so I started really unpacking that. Actually, it was really fun. It was a group of my colleagues. We had a traditionalist, a boomer, an Xer, a millennial, and I had some Zs in there giving feedback. It was a cross-generational team that was looking at cross-generational learning.
Nice.
And there are very poignant differences in view of authority, work, relationships, and learning, how we even view education. And so it took me down the Gen Z route because I was like, who is this Gen Z? I'd never even heard of them. And I realized it's because they were just now coming into college. And then I was like, oh my gosh, that's it. Like we are still approaching learning in a way that resonates with the older demographic. And it is not bad.
Right.
But we have to make space for the reality that there's a whole new generation of learner. And so we can't ignore that just because it's easier for us to teach the way we understood how we were taught.
More comfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was kind of how it started.
Well, it's interesting. And I love that you set it up that way because I think the best innovations come from just observing reality.
Yeah.
But so many times we assign a thing good or bad, you know, that, oh, the old way is bad. No, it's not. It's just the old way. Right. And it's accepting when we say, well, let's just observe what is, then it takes our emotions out of it a little bit and we can see it maybe a little bit differently. But you said Gen Z was, 10 years ago entering college. And I think it's important for our listeners to understand now we've got Gen Alpha, which most don't even heard of. They're entering the workforce this year, which is incredible.
Yeah. And that's the other part that I think I feel so passionate about is let's not wait until they're here to figure out how to solve it because it will take that long and then they're gone.
True.
But, and then as we look at the trajectory of a learner right now, boomers are now exiting, right? So COVID just accelerated that percentage, but I think they anticipated by this year to next year, there's only going to be about 19 to 20% of boomers left in the actual workforce. Now that might be a little different with economically. If they're choosing to stay long, people are living longer, are healthier, they're retiring later, right? But for the most part, there's a huge shift.
Yeah.
So the predominant learner right now are Xers, millennials, and Zs.
Right.
We're still teaching to the boomer.
Yeah.
And so what I love about it, though, is to say, instead of saying, let's not do it that way anymore, we say, how do we leverage every generation in the classroom to help each other understand a topic? Right? So anytime you have a chance and there's age difference, how do you put them in a group together? because it's not about the project. It's about how they're working together. How do you leverage the boomers' experience to share the stories, the context, the history, their work experience, while also giving validation and knowledge and applause to this younger generation who sees it differently and needs to have a voice to that.
Yeah.
Right. So education then becomes just a microcosm of this beautiful idea of the cross-generational learning experience.
Well, in a microcosm of the workplace.
Exactly.
Because that's why I mentioned that. You think, I like what you said, let's not wait till they show up.
Yeah.
Let's be ready.
Yeah.
And that's for those employers, you're working in that environment as well. They need to recognize they're hitting the workforce this year. They're 15 years old.
Yeah.
We've got to change some things in our mentality. So from a learning perspective, you're talking about really kind of mixed classrooms because that's what's happening.
Yeah.
But if we've got some listeners that are, say they're Gen X instructors, administrators, but they're working with a room full of Gen Z learners or Gen Alpha learners. What's that dynamic? Because it's not intermixed other than instructor to teacher.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Or student.
Yeah. So that's a fascinating discussion because I have a unique perspective. And in encountering this, some faculty have said, like, I respect you, but not going to happen.
Not happening.
But I believe that however you show up in the classroom is your relationship proposition with these students. Okay. So it isn't just, I'm the instructor, right? I'm here to teach you something. It's, I'm a learner with you. And so how I set up my expectations, how I hold you accountable to those expectations, how I communicate, how I give feedback is my relationship proposition with you. And so if I want a specific relationship with you so that you can trust me and so that I can really help you learn, I have to change who I am as a faculty member and say, I'm probably not the most important person in the room.
Yeah.
So that's one. So even from how big of a deal you make your expertise, because they can Google half the stuff you teach them in class, right? So it's more about how do I bring who I am and what I have learned to their space and allow them to co-create their learning by actually giving them food for thought, challenging him, giving him knowledge, but not being the bearer of the only person who can give the knowledge.
Yeah.
So that's a huge thing. Now, Gen X is really I love Gen X for this reason. Gen X are the interpreters between the boomers and the millennials and the Zers because they were around pre-tech craziness and post-tech. Like they started college with a typewriter, ended college with a laptop, right? So they are that generation, small and mighty, but they're a generation that also was pretty questioning of institution. So like, well, how come?
That's an
Why?
understatement, right?
Yeah. Right? I know. I know.
Xers are the most proud generation.
Completely. And they are, hard. But
we had Rage Against the Machine.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
How much
Our music even promoted this.
Yeah. And I was talking about it. It was like, even My So-Called Life came out during that time. Like everything was like, anything institutional was horrible, right? So there's a beauty in that though, because they're built to challenge. And so it's great.
Yeah.
Now, but with Gen Z and millennials specifically, they are about their identity is so right in front of their face. And their lived experience and their emotional connection to it is what drives their willingness to listen.
Interesting.
So Gen Xers are like, we're the latchkey kids. Like, our kids, my parents didn't even know. I don't even think my parents knew where I was half the time, right? But that was part of the culture of it. We had to learn how to resolve conflict. We had to learn how to engage in the world in a very tough way. So we are naturally more tough. But we're dealing with a generation that had millennials completely structured from start to finish. Everybody needs to be affirmed, down to Gen Z that is now like, you are equal with me as a parent. There's a lot of description to Gen Z that is not anybody's fault but the parents, right? Like we've built this culture that has based it on emotional based experience.
But we blame it on the Z.
It's not their fault.
So frustrating.
It's culture and parenting. We did it to them.
Yeah.
Right. And that's not bad. So anyway, so in the classroom, when we have that encounter as an Xer or a boomer who's like, just do what I tell you, follow the assignments, that does not resonate. Why are we doing this assignment? Help me make sense to my future career goals. Tell me, and we're doing stupid assignments. So why aren't we actually crafting applied work that is helpful?
Yeah.
So doing that, but also when we give feedback, Xers are like, tell me what I need to fix, move on. Like, I don't need like a long thing. Right. But for millennials and Z, it is a matter of identity that they want the feedback because they want to do better, but they also need to understand the context of why you are giving them the feedback that they're getting. Yeah. So that's what I mean. It's a relationship coaching model versus a teacher learner model. So I always say we have to change it from, and it's the same with leadership. We have to change it from I'm a leader and follower to we're leader followers, leading following. Mm-hmm. And we have to give the space for the learner to actually lead us in some things and also coach them and lead them that way rather than that traditional way. Does that help?
Yeah,
does that make sense?
Yeah, it's kind of a diffusion, but a sharing of power.
Yes.
As opposed to that more traditional model where the instructor, the leader of the class has all the power. And,
it's a decentralization. I mean, in academic terms, it's a shift from pedagogy to andragogy.
Yeah.
But it's more than that.
Yeah.
So with the work we do with teams, I talk about a tri-blend learning model that we use, which is just we're using a combination of whole brain learning, Socratic method, and andragogy. And we're blending all that together when we work with teams because understanding learning is you can transcend all these differences and all these nuances by aiming for the human side of it, which is mostly what Leading Adam is all about. Adam, if you don't know this, why it's named Leading Adam is human or humanity in Hebrew.
Yeah. Okay.
Which is why it's called Leading Adam, because it transcends these things. But there is something really powerful when you invite the learner to join you in the journey. What you said, it confirms, we had a guest, his name's Roger Younts. He's a school administrator and founder of an alternative high school. And in episode 9, he made reference to the fact that his students hold them accountable and they hold the student accountable and they learn together. He said this very similar. I thought, and hearing you say that should be confirmation to them that they are right where they need to be in the learning process.
Oh, yeah. And I will say, though, you know how much ego you have to withhold to be in that space?
Oh, yeah.
And do you know how much you have to withhold that you spend years of your life writing dissertations, doing the work to prove that you know, and then you have to go in that space and say, I know it, but how do I let you learn it first?
Especially as a Gen X. It's deeply rooted.
Yes.
I think what's helped me, and I don't know what Erica would say, but I think what helps me is understanding all the research and I'm a data junkie, but data's always looking backwards.
Yeah.
Never does it look forward. It's impossible. And I think that helps is go, okay, this was true, but I got to look this direction, which means I got to ask someone that's, ahead of that.
Yeah. I also think that a really great contribution we can make, and I say this of all the generations so there was a book that came out called The Gen Z Effect. And it was a futurist that wrote it, and I never say his last name right, but it's Stuopoulos or something like that.
Close enough.
But he said, it's everything pre-Z and everything post-Z. It's that dramatic of a shift, and that everything post-Z is going to be more like the same. It's never going to go back to the way it was. And one of the things that I realized, though, is that the beauty of cross-generation and the beauty of any time you can build that in is that Millennial and Zs naturally don't have natural built-in problem-solving skills, conflict resolution skills, self-awareness, because we structured their day so there was no time for it. And it was so achievement-oriented for Millennials. And Zs, it's not about that, but we also so emotional, we have actually, in promoting mental health and well-being, we've actually also gone extreme in not helping them learn how to handle the basics, where we have an opportunity then. And I think this is true in employment too. And I'm working with a lot of organizations where this is the key, is that we have to actually build their grit and their relational muscles. So if in the classroom we believe that the best learning happens when we enable them, we also then have to believe part of helping them be a good employee of the future is building those muscles. And that means holding them accountable, crafting the work in a way that they have an outcome that they can meet. And when they don't meet it, we have to talk about it. And so really we're saying the classroom needs to be an extension of the workplace.
Yeah.
And helping them do that. And that generations have an opportunity to speak to that, because Xers are amazing in this is what we need to do and this is not right. Boomers are great in saying, well, let's give you the history to it. And let's talk a story. Let's talk about networking. My goodness, boomers are amazing networkers, right? So how do we, it doesn't matter where you are in the higher ed space. If we believe if they're in higher ed, they're not just in the classroom. The whole system is supporting higher ed, is supporting that student. So all generations supports it in those different facets.
Yeah. Do you think the connection there, I'm curious, as I'm listening to you talk, like with a Gen X, for example, or even a boomer, but being able to receive feedback and almost that ability to sort of take the emotion out of it, compartmentalize, like, oh, that's feedback. Thank you. I'm going to move on and just on to the next, right? Whereas in your description of like Gen Z and probably Gen Alpha coming up here, that feedback can be so closely tied to their identity. It sounds like there's more of an emotional connection with that. Like how, as a leader, what are some practical ways? Like how do you reconcile that? How, as you're coaching that Gen Z and providing that feedback, how are you doing that in a way that doesn't, I don't know, tear them down or like protects that, but also provides that feedback because they need it. It's sensitive.
Yeah, I think it goes to my posture and your posture, your countenance, because to be able to receive feedback, and I think this is true of all of us, we have to receive it and be willing to receive it from the individual.
Right.
And so I think sometimes we think, well, I'm in this position of authority. They need to take it. That is true to an extent. But I am a firm believer that you have to show them a reason to trust your feedback, right? So my posture has to be set up saying, this your story. I want you to understand my story. What's your story? And develop a relationship in which trust can be there so you can give that feedback. And a lot of that is from your tone of voice to your posture in your face to how you write your assignments to how you, and in the online space, how we communicate in the online space, students pick up on it, right? Yeah. And then the first time you give them feedback and they're not sure about it, how you follow up with them. It's really a long game of trust building. It's a trust building thing. And I have found that it takes more work in some ways. Yeah. But if you don't build your classroom around the lecture style and you craft assignments and craft projects that allow that to emerge more easily, then you can then turn into this coach. Like, I'm here to ask you questions. I even have to say to people, when I'm giving you feedback, I want you to imagine my face smiling and beaming for you, saying yes and just want to give you the best food for thought so you can be good at what you do. Changes it.
Yeah.
From saying like, you did this wrong. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's kind of like what they tell you in admissions is smile.
Yeah.
When you start, they can hear your smile.
Yeah, they can hear your smile.
Yeah, I think there's so much to that. And
absolutely.
I think we're going to have you come back.
Love
because
it.
there's just not enough time to go
We didn't
deep
even talk about
on
Legos.
This. We didn't even get to Legos.
We didn't even get to Lego.
And we've run out of clock. But would you, if you'd be willing to come
Absolutely.
back, we would love to have you come back.
It.
And we'll get right to it when you come back and get into some detail, because it is, I think the listeners are going, I was so close to getting what I think I wanted to hear.
Okay.
There's so much around this generational stuff that we need to better understand. And I think you're the person to help walk us through
Awesome.
it. So
I'd love to.
enjoyable conversation and fascinating experience. You got a big task in front of you.
Thank you. I know.
Yeah.
I love it. And I feel like for just this time as this, if I can do it and put my energy to it, I will.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, they're lucky to have you.
Thanks.
And we are blessed.
Yes.
have
New
you all.
friends.
Yes,
New
I
friends.
know. A new friend that feels like an old friend. My
I
goodness.
know.
This is fun.
So fun.
Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure.
Thanks for joining us here at the Leading Adam podcast. We hope you found inspiration and hope to see you again next time. Leave us a comment on YouTube, or if you have an idea for a future episode, let us know that too. You can connect with us at 240solutions.com. Thanks, and we hope to see you again next time.